And we're on. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Gentleman's Standard. I'm Yor-El Francis,
And I'm Cecil Burrows.
and we're really excited to talk to you about our next topic, which is connection. And I see connection as a holistic thing that's sort of like a thread that brings humanity together. And I'll start with the anecdote of sometimes connection is just a single act of investment that can echo for decades, i.e., a book that my grandparents gave me years ago was the kernel, a seed that was planted for this podcast. And I think that sometimes we don't understand the impact of our connection on a single person or a group. And that's why I'm really excited to talk about connection today.
Yeah, I'll to kind of echo the sentiment. What we ultimately have been laying the groundwork for is understanding as we set standards for ourselves on a consistent basis. This is not only the factoid of ensuring that we are our true and best selves, but how are we influencing those around us? How are we growing our networks effectively? Um, as you stated, one of the big things is pulling the thread through, right? And that's a conversation point around seeing the end goal, which what we're trying to accomplish, which is effective communities and uplifting ourselves. If you set certain standards and you're able to influence and pour back in, ultimately those connections will help not only those that you deal with on a consistent basis, but also help you. And quite frankly, a lot of the hard work that we get into in building ourselves up, um, and fine tuning ourselves and ensuring that we have the legacy footprint that's necessary. And we've talked about command, we've talked about presence, we've talked about how we show up in our grooming, our overall grooming, et cetera. Some other topics that we've gone down path on. What are you doing to pour back in, and what type of connections have been out there from that standpoint? And if something went wrong, who could you rely on? And those connections have been are important to ensure that you establish that pathway forward. So this is a conversation I think is right on.
100%. And it's something that I think is easily glossed over. I could say
Hmm.
that every major chapter of a human's life or a man's life is influenced by someone who believed in them, someone who challenged them, someone who loved them, someone who disappointed them, someone who taught them. I mean, the connection for me, from my perspective, is that invisible force that just shape our lives on a daily basis. Um, and I think a lot of people sometimes get caught in thinking that connection is just about networking and about your circle and about moving ahead. And that's for me not really connection. I read an article I think a couple of days ago about an epidemic that's going on in Japan where elderly people are dying alone at alarming rates and being discovered weeks later.
Hmm.
And that is a severed connection. That's a severed tie to the community. That's a severed tie to life in of itself. And for me, that's like a warning alarm bell ringing for humanity as a whole. And that to me is the crux of connection. Sometimes we are so consumed in our daily lives with work and all the things that keep us busy that we forget just to take that moment and have a meaningful connection with another fellow human being. And it's getting more and more to be the norm that we gloss over connection uh, as opposed to it being that, you know, tie, that glue that joins us.
What's your take on how the part that social media plays in all of that, in the loss of connection, or the friendship recession that we're experiencing?
You know, the friendship recession is real. Um, as I've grown older, I realize I've lost my friends. Um, I used to have a shitload of friends. Uh, High school, I had a bunch of friends. College, I had even more friends. A young adult, even more friends. And now I think my friendship list has whittled down to like maybe three or four people. Uh, and if you want to count people you work with, which they can be friends. But the friendship recession is real. Social media, I don't think that social media, um, I think social media helps with connections. I don't think it takes away from connections. I'm not one of those parties who's like, social media is the evil, uh, monster in the room. I think that uh, it's a tool, and as with any tool, you use it sparingly.
Hmm.
Social media has helped me connect with people I lost touch with decades ago. Um, and in that spirit, I think it's a great tool. But then it can also be an isolating tool where it's the only point of your connection and there's no connection that's interpersonal. And I think that's where the danger lies.
The the reason I brought that up, and I think you're spot on. It is all dependent around how you leverage this, right? Social media can be a little bit of a myth in the sense that a myth to friendship, in the sense that you can look at the individuals you're connected with, and it could be 3,000 people from that standpoint. And if something went sideways for you, like I was saying earlier, not a work problem, a life problem.
Hmm.
How many of those individuals could you really connect with or call and have a conversation? Who's that? Who are those individuals, and who have you reached out to? The point you brought up around your circle that you had before, because we're extremely social,
Hmm.
has consistently shrank over time, and you end up finding who's your crew, right? Personally and professionally, that you can rely on. We've heard of work besties and work husband, work wife, things along those lines, and individuals that you trust from that standpoint. Those are generally kept um, it's insulated. That's usually the case. Um, but from a professional based perspective, how have you poured back into the community and created connections, especially when you're setting certain standards, right? The more practiced that we are in that space and building those type of connections, the better off we are, right? A community is what you're building from that standpoint. When was the last time you actually reached out to an individual? Something I try to ask myself from time to time when I built networks. So I don't only have one network, I have several different interlocking networks from that standpoint. And the point you brought up around the friendship recession is what was surprising to me is understanding that men with no close friends, when you look at stats and insights, have it's been shared that that's been risen fivefold since 1990. And the share with six or more close friends fell from 55% to 27%. So, to the point you brought up, our circles keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And in many instances, if we haven't poured into ourselves, we're missing the opportunity to really build ourselves up from that standpoint. And the more that you're in these shrinking environments, eventually you can end up in that space where you talked about, where individuals overseas are being found weeks after they've passed away because no one's bothered to check in because you really don't have that level of community. And when we talk about establishing standards, we want to make sure that individuals don't fall by the wayside from that standpoint.
And I think that is part of a gentleman's standard,
Hmm.
is maintaining community. Um, there's the myth, what I call the myth of the self-made man. Uh, no man is an island. We didn't get here alone. And as we progress in society and we change places with our dads and our uncles and our grandparents, it's important for us to maintain that connection and to continue to be tied to whatever community it is that we're a part of. And it's it's getting more isolating and harder to do that as we are technology bound and as we are living in far-flung places. And that is in of itself, it's a challenge, you know,
Hmm.
to be honest. It's not an easy thing to do because you want to maintain connections, but then sometimes people are hours away or countries away, um, you know.
I will say this: the big thing here, um, and those of us that have spouses, we pour into them, they pour into us, and a really healthy relationship is being able to, just share
Mhm.
and and provide feedback, insight, what have you, and supporting each other's growth, right? But if that is your only connection, um, a good point is that when something breaks, it can be a total catastrophe. Because that one relationship, if it becomes strained or gone,
Mhm.
there's no other channels to go down path on. And one of the things I found that's really helped me professionally is I got really purposeful around my networks and how I built them up and who I would check in on throughout that process to ensure that you're going into a place on a consistent basis. You have to ensure that you have some inner working relationships that move you along. And then also, I became very purposeful around how I pour back, what I do to mentor, offering up a helping hand to get others to grow themselves professionally. That turned into friendships. And then my friendships, what I've done is I've identified a circle of individuals from a diversified path,
Mhm.
diversified ethnically, diversified in our politics and how we think, our religion and how we think, our methodology and how we approach life. I have a group from every circle you can imagine, and we are open enough with each other to debate and discuss things around our thoughts and our feels and things along those lines. And for me, that's been an effective lifeblood connection point to ensure that I feel like I have a community with me, both on the personal side that's cared for and the professional side. And when I need to kind of pour things out and scream from that standpoint or celebrate, I have some people I can run to that I talk to quite a bit. I will say social media, um, and the ways that I've leveraged social media is to like you said, is to find individuals that I've missed for, I haven't seen in forever. And it's funny when you connect with those individuals, did you reach out or did you just connect and that was it? That's the kind
Yeah.
of thing that we got to think about from that standpoint. That's another topic because you built up another network, right? And as you expand out from that standpoint, you're checking in, you're wanting to see how things have gone, how have you been, et cetera, et cetera. Those are things that are important as we're trying to pour back in. If you're setting a standard as a gentleman from that standpoint, you want to make sure a part of that is growing is a really strong and diversified network and a
Well,
connection.
I think also, to your point, connection is also about being seen and being heard. And um, it's not just clicking on the link and adding a friend. Uh, it's the follow up, it's the phone call, it's the visit, um, it's the, lending an ear when an ear needs to be lent, or vice versa. Um, and so, yeah, connections, I think they're about seeing something in someone else that they may not see, and vice versa. And and I think that's what makes the connection grow and get strong. Um, I just feel like if people pour into you, then you sort of are. in a way obligated to then pour into others. Um, and uh, and that's just keeping the circle going, and continuing spreading the connection, and creating and building community with that spreading and that connection.
The the scariest thing about not really connecting with others, um, that I think some of this was impacted by the pandemic, right? It was an eye opener for individuals. I think you heard some of this. Is when that occurred and individuals were stuck in one place and stuck home, in some instances, is we closed ourselves off. A lot of folks did during that period of time, and it was an eye opener for, do I truly have a community out there, and do I truly have strong connections out there? Do I truly have strong networks out there? And since that time, what shocked me when I saw this was 34% of men saying that they don't share their true selves with others. So you've gone through, you try to work on yourself, to improve your presence and your brand and the way that you show up, and you keep that to yourself. Um, that is the increase in overall loneliness. And men and women both report in the same space equally a sense of loneliness, that's been out there and growing consistently in a time where we're all even more connected through social and all these segments. There's a lot of instances where individuals are not giving you who they are. They're playing a game, the fake it till you make it mentality, from that standpoint, until I can show up in this view of where I think I should be, and they never achieve it, from that standpoint, because they haven't really opened themselves up to individuals and built a community. And it's because of not setting standards for themselves and standards of the rooms that they want to be in. That creates a certain unique isolation, for
Right.
me, which I think is problematic.
Look, loneliness today is an epidemic. Uh,
Hmm.
we men have followers, contacts,
Hmm.
acquaintances. Um, but when you, to your point, dive deeper, you're lacking friendship, you're lacking brotherhood, you're lacking community. You're connected digitally, but then you're just more isolated emotionally. And I think that is it. As I said, it's an epidemic, and as a world as a whole, we're going through it. You know, we see the glitz and the glamour of your online presence, but don't see the spareness of your offline presence. You know, and and I think this conversation is about understanding that there's no need to gloss up an online presence when you don't have the standard offline
Yeah,
and the connection offline that rises to your online presence. I don't know if I'm making sense, but
you are.
uh,
You are.
because it's like that, yeah, you can be connected with your followers. That's huge. But then, what is that life like once you click off? You know, once you are not broadcasting, once you're walking around the kitchen, or sitting in front of the television, or whatever, you know, what's that life like? And what are your connections in that life? And how are you handling that life? You know, do you have, you know, that person you can call, that person you can turn to, that person you can run to, that, place that is a sense of community, the place where you feel a connection. Um, and I think sometimes that gets lost in the shuffle.
It's the point you make, um, with being lost in the shuffle, is for me. We talked about this a while ago when we talked about command and presence, right? And how you show up in a room and be known. Um, you can be in a room and still be unknown in it, right? And this is with individuals who you have a quote unquote connection with. If there's not an element of where you feel as though your true self is showing up in said room, you can definitely feel like an imposter without true connections within certain spaces. And,
Mm-hmm.
and the overall goal here, on what we're discussing and why we talk about standards being so important, is the value you bring.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we've seen as a network is, I would say, leverage. It's not a relationship from that standpoint. In some instances, it can be, depending on how you build it. And the big thing for me, so I'll give you an example. Uh, right now in the corporate world, a lot of your companies are cutting to efficiency, meaning that they're looking at lines of business and say, look, this no longer is something that we consider a value add to our overall mission, so we're going to divest away from it. Which, unfortunately, those are people and families that are being impacted.
Mm-hmm.
So people wake up with a really big wake up call, whatever time of the month it may be, and all of a sudden their career is gone, and now they've got to find some things. What generally tends to happen in those instances is you try to figure out, what can I do to dust myself off once you get over the the shock of what's happening, the concern, the panic, and all those things that come in right away. And you go, okay, now I've got to figure out how I get on the path of building myself up for consideration into wherever else I need to go next, whether it's going back into this company or somewhere else from that standpoint. Um, we try to do that on our own for some ridiculous reason for a while. You'll reach out to folks that you think you know, and hey, I'm just checking in, and opportunities, if you haven't done that in a while. And it's even, what's interesting is it's even in instances where people have leveraged you in that way, where they've reached out to you and you've gone about it. We generally tend to not want to do that ourselves, right? We it's a personal issue and we're going to figure it out. It takes you a little bit, and then finally you start reaching out to your network and saying, hey, I'm just checking in to see if there are things that are coming up that you may be aware of. I'd love to stay connected and go down path on that. The challenge is when you get to that point and you recognize, hey, wait a second, who am I comfortable in calling? Who can I call? Who do I feel comfortable enough that I've created a connection that I know they can advocate for me? Or do I have to re-explain myself and who I am and the value that I bring? It's an eye opener because it tells you just how surfacey we may have been, for this network that we were trying to develop and procure for ourselves. Um, the point of my long-winded story is this: is don't let it be to the point of when something happens that you assess the importance of the connections that you should have been establishing and set up before. If you're able to pour into whatever that network may be, whatever those connections may be on a personal and professional level, you will tend to find you are ahead of the game, preparing yourself and insulating yourself from what will inevitably happen if you are employed, or if you have a career, if you own a business, etc. There are going to be humps. There are going to be times during the challenges along the way, and you're going to have to figure out a strategy in a session, a strategy on how to address it. A connection is a way of going about that, right? And if you wait to activate your connection when you're trying to get over that hump or whatever that challenge may be, in many instances, we never get on the other side of hard. We just
No,
don't.
because you find that those connections, in some ways, have been severed, and it is actually your own doing. Like networking asks the question, what can this person do for me? And I feel like connection asks the question, who is this person? It's a curiosity thing. And, how can we connect? And it's not a value add to connect. It's, let's see where this is going. Um, I, I this is a off the topic, but it's about connection. Uh, I'm a huge Michael Jackson fan. And so I was just going down the rabbit hole and reading some stories about how they made Off the Wall. And it turns out that Michael was doing The Wiz with Quincy Jones. And during one of the table readings, he was pronouncing Socrates as Socrates. And so during a break, Quincy pulled him aside, according to this person, and said, "Hey, you know, we don't pronounce it Socrates, we pronounce it Socrates or Socrates." And it was like a light bulb moment for Michael and Quincy. And that little moment was the beginning of their ultimate, wonderful, amazing relationship. And I think it's appropriate to talk about it because it talks about connection and it brings it back to how I started, that it's this small kernel that you never know how it's going to pay forward
Mhm.
decades from now, which is what that small conversation about being thoughtful about someone and not breaking out in the middle of the room with a guffaw, he doesn't know how to pronounce that, and being thoughtful enough to pull someone aside and say, hey, it's pronounced this way. And I think for me, that story speaks to a human connection and what connections are. It's not what can this person do for me. That's not what Quincy was thinking. That's not what Michael was thinking. It was, who is this person and how can I let him know that this is the path he should be on with this pronunciation, you know?
How have you, over the years, whether it be personally or professionally, um, really poured into creating quality connections, I would say, to strengthen your community?
I think that what happens is you become the connector. Um, and so if people, as we spoke about before, if people have poured into you, then you become, you grow in your arc of life and you start pouring into others. And that's what I try to do. As I've grown older, with the various places, I volunteer at and work with and people I mentor and places at work, you pour into things. You build that connector, you build that bridge so that there is something other than the common denominator of X, Y, or Z. And I think that then pays its dividends over time because then people hearken back to you reaching out before there was a crisis, before there was, the need. You were genuine enough to build and maintain that connection. I don't know if that's too vague, but that's.
Not vague at all. Yeah, it's to the point. One of the key points that I pull out of what you say is ensuring that you really, from a diligent based perspective, you are building, maintaining, curating, and protecting the things that you're pulling in from your overall, for lack of a better word, ecosystem, right? On what you saying, this is my people, this is my community, this is my village, and I'm going to ensure that we stay interactive or we stay engaged so that when things come up, we're there to have each other's back and support in whatever form or fashion. That's the difference, in my humble opinion, between connection and reach, right?
Mhm.
So, and that's the challenge with social media. And it's funny, I had somebody, a great friend of mine, who we had a group, and a lot of folks have moved away here in the Charlotte area. And as they've moved, social media has kept us engaged because we talk every day on social media. It makes you feel like you're seeing each other every day from that standpoint. But he brings up every time we see him, he's like, it's what's crazy for me is I'm all the way in Florida, but I feel like I'm here because we get a chance to talk. And then you start multiplying that by the number of individuals on your social media, in your social media fan, whether it be through LinkedIn, whether it be through Facebook, whether it be through Instagram, and so forth and so on. The difference between a true connection and a reach is what we talked about before. And if you have 1,000 people, right, that are part of your connections on LinkedIn, as an example, and none are any of them that you can pick up a phone and call, that's not a connection. That's a reach. That's
Mm.
reach. And you've got to figure out from that standpoint. I'm not saying you pick up the phone and call everybody today, but who's that one person that you haven't connected with and reached out to, but you connected, I'm sorry, you connected with them on LinkedIn as an example, but you have not taken the time to say, hey, I'm just checking in with you, see how things are going, or checking in just to see from an industry based perspective or on a personal level, just to say hi, because you've passed each other, which is really what social media is. You pass each other in the hall. And have you kind of built that up from that standpoint? I realize that's a failing of mine because I have so many people in that segment. I try to do it as frequently as I can. I get pretty purposeful about that. On any given week, I would be like, there's one or two people I want to reach out to, strategically speaking. And it's because I'm always thinking about what's the next thing, and when the necessary occurs, do I have people I can kind of engage with? Because I want to make sure that they see me as that person as well. I'm trying not to have a surface connection. I want a true connection and not really a reach. So the point you brought up is really selling with me. I'm hoping more and more people pay attention to that. Right? It is something that you build that actually adds value in the grand scheme of what you're trying to do as you build yourself up and you're trying to build others up, which for me is the impact of connection.
100%. Look, I used to live in New York City,
Hmm.
and when I lived there, I always would go to Harlem Week, which happens in August. And I remember taking one of my little nieces there, just, let's go, you'll have fun. And, not thinking anything about it. Um, and I say all that to say is like we rarely get to see the full impact of some of the seeds that we plant in other people's lives. Because what happened was I had no idea that this girl would take that and it shaped her whole
Hmm.
being.
Wow.
And she
Okay.
now lives in Harlem, went to school in Harlem, never misses a Harlem week. And, sometimes maybe that's the point. But again, it's about becoming the connector and uh, building and paying it forward. And I think that sometimes we, I don't know, maybe we just don't understand how valuable um, those little actions can be.
Some you said just triggered me from a thought based perspective. We've been talking about building yourselves up, right?
Mm.
And hopefully we're some of this stuff is resonating with the folks that are dialing in from that standpoint. How dare you? Um, and I'm talking to our audience. How dare you if you're building yourself up and you're really working on establishing a really really impactful standard, not giving that back and creating connections to help others come along this journey with you. Um, we have had too many people that are not willing to lift someone up, including myself at times during my career, just blissfully unaware that I could be pouring back in. And once I realized that, I was like, you know what, the hell with this. My goal here is I wish I would have taken time to ask for feedback, to ask for insight, to ask for time for coffee, just to get insight around my career and how somebody got to where they were. Um, and there are people waiting for you to have that conversation, or too scared to reach out to us as executives and individuals who have done something with themselves. If we're really taking that work and building ourselves up, and we've gotten to a point of where we feel pretty good around how we've established a certain standard, and I'm starting to make that happen, ensuring that you build some kind of connection with somebody else to pay it back is extremely important. And when I say how dare you, I'm talking to myself. That it took me a while to get there because head down, get the work done, you know, show my value and things along those lines that I should have been pouring back in years before I actually did.
Mm.
And the how dare you messages to me, my younger self. that I should have done more sooner for others. And that's why you find me doing a lot in the community and things like that today to ensure that I will never let that happen where I have a missed opportunity to kind of build that up with somebody else, not have established a standard.
I'm a firm believer that connection is not necessarily about proximity.
Mm,
It's influence, and it's the influence you have over someone. Some of the people who shaped us the most aren't the people we spent the most time with. They're the people who change the direction, the course of our lives.
that's a good
Um,
point.
yeah, and the thing about that is they showed a standard. And it's a standard that I aspire to. And that for me is it's important and it's why we're here. I feel having a gentleman's standard is a connection. I think it's an act, and I think it's something that crosses generations. And we hope that we're paying it forward to the future.
What look when you in the entertainment industry, because everybody assumes things are so surfacey because they don't know. We don't know. We don't understand. What have you experienced around somebody cracking because of the lack of true connections within the industry? What did they come? Did they make it back from that, or what were ways that they kind of built around that to strengthen that up?
Well, I think I can more so give an example of how not to, and harkens back to what you talked about in maintaining connections. So, how not to is not, when the shit hits the fan, you then begin a string of calls to say, hey, shit's hit the fan. Because A, nobody's going to take you seriously. And B, people are going to be like, oh, so shit hits the fan, and that's when you call. And then it turns into what we discussed before. Um, it's a matter of leveraging the relationship as opposed to maintaining that connection.
Sure.
Um, and I think that's across the board. I don't think it's industry specific. I think it's across the board, work related. You want to. It's sort of like plants. You want to water those seeds. You want to water those plants. Otherwise, they dry up and they shrivel up. They die. And that's what happens to a connection as well.
Yeah, I'll say from a corporate based perspective, unfortunately, I've been privy to several folks just cracking. Um, as you put it, when it hits the fan, and if you don't truly have the support mechanism and systems available to you, that ends careers, that ends people, that ends marriages from that standpoint. And some of this is because we are trying so hard to be one to be successful that we have lost ourselves in the process along the way. And that for us and what we're trying to convey to the point you're making is without us one without establishing who your inner self who you want to show up as and who you see yourself showing up as and building yourself up from that standpoint, how can you truly make a valuable connection with somebody else because you're not bringing yourself to your full self to the conversation and having an honest dialogue with an individual. um, as an example, this week I have two people in mind that I'm going to reach out to. One of them is my close friends. I talk to him probably once a week, twice a week, just as a check-in, whether it be by text. We talk by text every day, but we make sure that we pick up the phone and talk to each other. Is a gentleman who kind of is the head of our men's group that we have here in the Charlotte market, and what he's done, which has been extremely impactful. And I try to follow suit as well. Is he opens his home up and says, "Look, once every other Friday, you all come over, and we're just going to sit here and just let our hair down and debrief. It is open for any conversation or topic that needs to come in, but you're going to come over to my house. He has a patio area that he makes available to us. And we go down there, and whoever and however you're involved in this group, just show up. If you can make it, great. If you can't. And then he also adds in on a monthly basis, we got to do lunch. Let's just pull up for lunch, folks. Whoever can make it, again. And then we have a special session where we get together once every other month. From that standpoint, this group ensures that our sanity's in check, and it's not just our spouse that we're talking to say, "Hey, you're all the problems I'm having," and blah 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 blah. You actually have a diversified echo chamber, right? That plays things back to you in a way that could be different than the way that you see it. I've been talked off of ledges on some instances. I have changed course in my way of thinking on certain things because I got a differing opinion. And our group is full of individuals from all diverse backgrounds, all over. And that is on every range you can imagine. It has been amazing around how we've been able to attain this. And I've been a part of this group since 2007. And this gentleman oversees that. And what is encouraging me to do, I am an extrovert. My wife is an introvert. So I end up forcing her more times than not by having, look, this weekend, we're just going to have people over. And I call it cocktails and conversations. And for me, I found a passion thing, right, that I love to do. I love to bartend. So I think when you open that up and whether you're drinking or not, from that standpoint, I want to have people, I want to feel people's energy. I want to have conversations, and I want to make sure that it's not just on him to make that happen. I have that group, and I have neighbors, and I have others that come in. But I find it to be very cathartic, where we're able to come in, and I'm trying to create connections all over and having cross connections from that standpoint. That's my way of giving back and pouring into others. Because if you're around certain echo chambers that are just like you, and that's all you operate and function in, you miss the opportunity to really grow, in my humble opinion.
It's so funny you say that. Did we marry the same person? Because it's like that's one of the reasons why we do our backyard thing in the fall because it's the same exact reason. It's we have this great backyard. Let's share it with people and create connections. That's the only reason that we do that. And it's like what you're saying about your men's group is great because what happens there is that you're not waiting for crisis to happen until you become honest with each other. You're getting ahead of that, and that's what a lot of
Mhm.
us don't do.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important point and a very salient point to make. Don't wait for the crisis before you start connecting. Connect now. And I just want to end with a very funny story that I saw yesterday. I'm taking a Spanish class to brush up on my Spanish.
Yeah.
And the Spanish teacher showed me this really funny clip about a study that they did on a group of boys. I think they were like 9 or 10 years old. And they put them in a house and they said, hey, you guys are adults, you're responsible for yourselves. And those boys just tore that house up. They tore it apart. They ate like all kinds of junk food. They like trashed the place.
Oh
Um,
boy, that sounds
but
right.
the funny thing about the story is that they did it as a group. They were united from day one till the very end. There were no
Mm.
bickering, there was no fighting. They did it all in unison. And I thought that was an interesting anecdote to bring up for a conversation about community and connecting, because they clearly connected in chaos,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
but connected nevertheless. So I just thought that was a funny story to share with our audience.
The 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 one thing I would say That's crazy. First of all, yes, that makes sense. A group of boys just destroying stuff together. You got to figure out who's going to get the blame, who's going to pull all this stuff together. There's always strategy from that standpoint. But getting together and creating that frame network from that standpoint empowers you in certain ways, right? For good or bad. And that's why we say it's important to ensure that you set gentlemanly standards, right? Because when you go down path on that, it's around writing the world, building a strong legacy, making sure that you show up as your best self, and then trying to get others to do the same in your circles. We always say standards aren't followed; they're set. So be the one that's setting the standard. The one thing I would throw out there for individuals that are listening is take a beat and try to internalize the number of individuals. And if you have a lot of folks that are part of your inner circle, whether it be social media, professionally and personally, LinkedIn and all the other machinations that are pulled in play, what percentage of that network that you've established or your connections you've established can you truly reach out to and have a conversation? It should be all of them. And the question I would then ask you is, when was the last time you actually did reach out? Whether it be a quick note to say, hey, just checking in with you, remembering why you all connected in the first place. And even if it's somebody you connected with that wasn't in your inner circle, it's just that you all mutually have some connections. Hey, just wanted to re-up. Thank you for being a connection of mine. I'm hoping things are working out well for you. I've gotten a few of those, and it is a day brightener note. I call it, because it makes you go, hey, that's really actually pretty cool. And then I do the cursory reach back out from that standpoint. We've got to do that, because what you need to also understand is, if something breaks and there's a 2 a.m. call you need to make, have you really established who on that list you can reach out to? And by the by, that they can do that with you. When was the last time you had to activate? When was the last time somebody had to do that? You've got to start strategizing your plan, because as you build yourself up, you've also got to build up your connections to ensure that you all have each other's back. That's a part of this process. So give yourself that challenge to say, on a weekly basis, it may not be a phone call, right? It could be a text. It could be an outreach through your social media platform that you're engaged with. You'd be surprised how many people will respond. And it builds you up to protect you in instances where chaos occurs, quite frankly. And don't let it be, Yor-El, to your point, when something breaks that you think about doing it, because it becomes so disingenuous that, oh, now is the time you want to reach out to me when this happens, right? I know that's how I feel.
And I'd say, to echo what you said, have the courage to reach out. There's no shame in it. There's just have the courage, because reaching out equals establishing a connection, and just take it from there. And those are my closing words.
Yeah, I'll say, closing with this, and I saw this and it was so apropos. You don't rise to the level of your network, you fall to the level of your connections.
Mm,
Build the few that hold on purpose, right? From that
spot.
standpoint, understand connection versus reach.
Well, guys, thank you for listening. We hope you're tuning in to our episodes, and thank you again.
Looking forward to our next topic and conversation. Again, as we build up, setting standards are not followed, they are set. Our goal here is to ensure that we're giving you food for thought around how we approach and build ourselves up, a brand that's long lasting, which leads to a legacy that's long lasting, so that individuals, after you've left the room, are able to articulate that person as somebody that we can aspire to be.
And maintain a connection with.
Great point. Great point.
Alrighty, ending the session.
Well, have a good one.